Hello and welcome to a gameplay for all seasons. Once again we're talking about Hogwarts Legacy, and in this video we're covering magical creatures, and in fact all creatures that you should be seeing in this game. Now I'm going to split this video into three separate parts. Firstly, we're going to look at the creatures we know are in the game. Secondly, we're going to talk about the creatures that have been suggested they're in the game. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about the creatures which, because it's based in Hogwarts, to me, should be in the game, and I would expect them to be in there. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, then please subscribe. We talk about this sort of stuff all the time. Get at least one video on Hogwarts Legacy coming every week, and we'll have loads of other content as well. Okay, so let's start with this. Now, the way we're going to go through this list is effectively going through all of the creatures that we've seen in the video. So in the trailer to this, so we know that they're going to be in there. Now starting off with our first one then, and this one isn't the most exciting potentially, or at least to begin with doesn't sound the most interesting because it's not a magical creature per se, but it is actually an owl. Now this comes right at the beginning of the video when you see your cart travelling through the sky. You've got your carts loaded up with a bunch of things that all look like it comes from Diagon Alley, and one of those things is an owl. So in itself, you could say, yep, we know owls are in the video. We do actually see an owl later on in the video as well, in the courtyard. So we know they're definitely a feature there. But the reason this is even more interesting is because it kind of suggests that we are going to have what we know Hogwarts students do have, which is each has a creature with them. We know Harry had Hedwig, the owl. Hermione had Crookshanks, the cat. Which are probably the ones that might feature in this game, might have other ones as well. We know Ron had Scabbers the rat, and also he had other creatures as well, like I think it was Neville that had a frog, or Toad, depending on what you want to call that. So that's an interesting one to start off with. Now the second creature you see in the trailer is a moon calf. Now a moon calf is a magical creature, and though there is something called that in real life, the Wizarding World version is something that is slightly different. So a moon calf in the Wizarding World is a sort of shy, nocturnal creature. It's got big bulging eyes, a long neck, pale grey body. You could say it looks cute, or some people might say it's quite ugly. But either way, it's sort of a cutish, kind of small, innocent looking creature of some description. Apparently they do complicated dance moves in the moonlight, which may be where they got the name from, and apparently responsible for crop circles. In terms of where we see these outside the game, you do actually get a herd of these in Newt Scamander's suitcase in the film of Fantastic Beasts. Now in the trailer, you're seen throwing breadcrumbs or whatever it is, whatever the food is that you give to moon calves, that's getting thrown down, which is interesting because it shows that you're either taming them, which may show that some sort of skill that you learn. So an interesting thing that I think that might be is actually, I think it could be a show of a quiz that you get, and potentially herbology, because their dung is used to make magical plants grow fast and strong. So I think, it may be suggesting that, we know there's going to be classes, and maybe this is a lesson in class. You have to go out there, tame these creatures, or at least befriend them in order that you can get some of that dung, in order that you can make magical plants. So that's a slight side there. But like I say, we know we're going to get moon calves in there. So third creature again, and is our second and probably only one in the whole of this list, which isn't a magical creature, is a cat. It's only very briefly see it, and it's right at the corner of the screen, but sitting next to a fire in a scene where maybe it's a classroom or something. There's a few people sitting around talking. There's a cat right at the very edge of that. You see it moving very, very slightly. That lends even more weight to the fact that you'll probably be able to have your own creature like an owl or a cat or what have you. So like I say, not too much exciting to say there, but it backs up that first point we had. Okay, so the fourth creature we see then is, and this is very much a magical beast, is a hippogriff. Now, with a hippogriff, you're seen in the video actually flying on it or riding it, depending on what you do when you're on a creature like that in the sky. And it looks very much like a hippogriff. You kind of see it from behind. And most of you remember that Hagrid was very fond of Buckbeak in A Prisoner of Azkaban, in that film and book. And that, of course, was a hippogriff. So it looks like we may have those creatures. And we know, at least at Harry's time, they were used as part of lessons by Hagrid. So it makes sense they'd be in the game. Okay, number 5 then, a 5th creature is the Inferi. Now, this is an interesting one actually, because these are ones you see sort of ghoulish looking characters walking through an underground tunnel towards the camera. And that's what they are. They're the Inferi. So they're effectively sort of reanimated dead bodies, which is performed using dark magic called necromancy. It's like a branch of dark magic. So that kind of suggests these are probably some enemies that you'll get. It's probably some dark wizard has raised them and you have to fight them. A slight interesting side actually, and ties into some of the other things we discussed in some of the other videos, is, they say you can be what you want to be, which kind of suggests you can be good or bad. It would be interesting actually if we've raised these, right? If you can be a dark wizard, you could learn this skill. We know that we can learn ancient magic, so maybe raising the dead in this way and creating these Inferi is something that you can do, which I think would be quite interesting. Though in reality, I imagine these are probably just enemies that you can face. But like I say, it'd be interesting to see what they do with it. So 6th creature then, and it's a little unclear which creature this is, but to me, I think, and I've seen other people say something different, but to me, I think these Dementors, you see some Dementor-looking type characters sort of wafting down the corridor towards the camera in what appears to be Hogwarts. Now, I imagine it's Dementors. They look like Dementors, and I think it wouldn't come as that much surprise if they're in there. They're a very big part of the series, and if they're in there, that may suggest that we're able to cast our own Patronuses, which will be interesting, but that is a bit of a leap there. But if you've got Dementors, it makes sense that you'll be able to cast your Patronus, which I know a lot of people are excited about, so maybe that's something else that points to. So the 7th creature then that we absolutely know is going to be in this game, and it's the sort of the big creature that rushes towards the screen, is actually called a Graphorn. So the Graphorn, it's a big creature, it's aggressive, it's very, very dangerous, and apparently the skin is tougher than dragons. But what's really interesting with this creature is you see it sort of running at the character, sort of scaring the character, jumping out of the way, suggesting it's an enemy in some way. And it's actually, there's a second view of this again, and you're there rubbing its nose, or whatever you call the front part of a Graphorn. And that's interesting, because that suggests, to the earlier point when I said about the Mooncalves, is that it looks like it's going to be some sort of taming system in this game. So maybe it's something you learn, maybe it's something everyone has, but it suggests, it wouldn't just necessarily be the Mooncalves and the Graphorn that you can tame, but potentially maybe there's other things you can tame as well, which would be interesting. Another slight side with the Graphorn actually is that powdered Graphorn horn is actually used in many potions, a very magical type of material. So going to what I said earlier about potentially feeding the Mooncalves for herbology, maybe this is going to be for some potion. Your potions class, you're going to see them as well. So kind of, maybe I'm putting connections together that won't be there, but it would be quite nice if all these things do tie together. I don't quite know how you get powdered Graphorn horn without hurting the beast, but maybe you just rub it or something and it comes off. But it'll be interesting. Maybe that's not something you'd have in this, but we'll see. So the next creature we have, and this is the 8th one on the list, 8 of the 10 actually, we're going to go through in this first section, which are the ones we know are going to be in the game before we move on to those second and third categories I said, is a troll. So the troll we see it sort of throwing a big log or hammer towards the character again as you roll out of the way. It's not too dissimilar to what Hermione finds herself trapped with in the girls' bathroom in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or if you're in the US, Sorcerer's Stone. So it probably comes as no surprise that a troll is in there. So moving on to number 9 then is a dragon. Now it's nice to see that this creature will be in the game. It plays an important part in Harry Potter all the way through, or at various points. And in this trailer, we do see it quite a few times. I think we see it 3 or 4 times. I mean, the fact it features so prominently suggests that it will be an important part of the game when it comes out. And then the last of this first section, right? So these are the ones that are in the video. Like I say, we're about to move on to the next ones, which aren't in the video specifically, but the video very much points that you can kind of get there. Okay, so the last one of these ones is the giant spider. It probably comes, again, as no surprise that there's giant spiders in Hogwarts. We know that there's plenty of them in Forbidden Forest in the 1990s, which is when Harry Potter went there. So it makes a lot of sense. They look all quite old. That you've had them there for years. So that's in there. Very briefly, you see a giant spider and you fighting it. So that doesn't come as a big surprise. Okay, so that's the first section, and there's 10 of those. Those are things that you absolutely will be in there. So now what we're going to do, there's 2 of these before we move on to our third section. So 2 in this middle section, which is the ones which have been pointed out by the trailer, but you don't specifically see. So the first of these is the Thestral. Now that is this one's in Harry Potter. It's the one that Luna and Harry can see because they've seen death occur. So they're able to see them. They're sort of the rather skeletal horses which pull the carts into Hogwarts. Now, the fact you have a flying, moving cart taking you in there right at the beginning suggests that it's probably getting Thestral's probably pulling it, which I think absolutely makes sense. I have read that various places them saying, anyone who knows about Harry Potter knows that Thestrals pull these things. Absolutely, they're there. Yes, probably. But we also know that it isn't just Thestrals that pull these things. There are other ways, there are other charms you can use, particularly before, Hogwarts Express took people to Hogwarts. We know there was a whole bunch of different ways people get there, and it wasn't all Thestral, and a lot of them were carts. So potentially could be other things, but I imagine it probably is Thestral. I mean, it's an interesting animal to include in there, so I imagine it probably is. And the second one that's suggested in the video, and is very strongly suggested in the video, is a Bogart. So this is the one where they jump out the closet, you cast a spell and turn them into something funny that you don't find scary. That's very much appears to be shown in the video. There's quite a nice graphic where they turn something into something else that sort of swings around, this wooden type thing. So I think that's probably most likely in the game as well. Okay, so moving on then to our very last section here, and there's 4 creatures that I think they're not mentioned, they're not seen in the video, they're not suggested in the video, but this is set in Hogwarts. They're trying to be expansive, they're trying to show a sort of exhaustive side of Hogwarts here. So I really think these will be included. So the first one of these is the Mer People. Now, when you're flying in the Hippogriff in the trailer, you're across a body of water. It's not completely clear what that body of water is, but it would make sense if that is the Black Lake, which we know is in the grounds of Hogwarts. In which case, like I say, if there's a underwater mechanic or something like that where you can actually go underwater, obviously that's a whole different part of the game. We're seeing that it wasn't in Horizon Zero Dawn. That's a big new feature they're putting into Horizon Forbidden West. So that's a feature that may be in the game. It may not. They may wait for later versions of the game or for a sequel or something like that. But if it is in the game and the latest in the game, it makes sense that more people will be there. So I would expect them to be there. The second creature then is, we're talking about the Forbidden Forest. Who lives in the Forbidden Forest? Well, centaurs. We absolutely know that they're in the forest. Again, we don't know exactly when they were there. We know this game's set 100 years before Harry went to Hogwarts, and also 50 years before the Fantastic Beasts films. So it makes sense that centaurs would be there, and I'd expect them to be there. We would very much want the Forbidden Forest to be a place full of life, full of interest, full of intrigue, and I think absolutely you put those there, you get those things. And also, it's the sort of creature which they're not really good, they're not really bad, they sort of fall in the middle depending on how you view them. So I think they're a very interesting animal, or being, at least you'd call them, in there. So then the third creature then, and I think this would be a really interesting one, and one I'm really, really, really hoping they include, and if you're doing justice to Hogwarts and really trying to be true to it, you kind of have to include these, and these are house elves. Now, the reason you have to include those is they really are behind a lot of the workings of Hogwarts, right? They really are there. They work the kitchens, which you should be able to look around, because, if you're going to be able to free roam around Hogwarts, you should be able to see where the food's made, because the food is made, it just doesn't come out of air. When Dumbledore does what he does, and he'll suddenly things come into the hall. They don't come out of nowhere. They are actually made by the house elves, and they're just transported there. So yeah, you should see them. They don't just do that. They do all sorts of other things around the castle. So you should be able to bump into those, and they're really interesting. You know, you can, you know, we've seen in Harry Potter films, you get Dobby, who's very friendly, and you've got a very different personality to Kercher. So who's obviously lives in Sirius Black's house. So that's interesting in Grimmauld Place. So that'll be interesting. So the very last of the creatures across all these lists that I want to talk about is, again, one that's not specifically shown in the trailer, but I would be absolutely amazed, and you'd be missing a huge part of Hogwarts if you didn't include them, is the ghosts. Now, I will make another video about the ghosts, because you can absolutely, there's lots to talk about here. You know, Nearly Hedward's Nick, you've got Peeves, etc., etc. There's a load of people to talk about, or a load of ghosts to talk about, and whether or not they'll be there and what their role may be. So like I say, you can look out for that video a little bit later. I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I've enjoyed making it. As I said at the beginning, subscribe, like the video if you've liked it. Love to hear about your comments. If there's other beasts that you think will be in here, or any of these that you don't, then like I said, I'd love to hear about that. So I will see you on the next video.